we talk a lot about intention, and we talk a lot about, practicing and really knowing yourself as an athlete, so that you kind of take a lot of the question marks out of the workout, out of your movements, out of your pacing, out of your rep schemes, etc. And that's the thing I think we try to fight the most is doubt and fear. Because if you have an athlete that can go into a competition, the workouts come out, and there's no doubt there. There's no fear. There's just essentially like, okay, this is the workout. This is how I'm going to attack it. And, I'm in my zone. I'm in my bubble. I'm not worrying about what anyone else is doing. And I'm maximizing my potential and point value on every single workout. That's a big thing. And that's really what we preach. But I think trying to get that voice out of your head, that's saying, man, I don't know if I can do 30 strict handstand pushups, or it's going to take me longer than this person, or I don't know if I can do this, blah, blah, blah. So, having that doubt creep in, the negative voices, I think obviously is a killer for mindset excellence.
This is the Limitless Athlete podcast. I'm Tom Foxley, founder of Mindset Rx'd and your host. And I believe that to rid ourselves of doubt, we must face our most uncomfortable truths.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm willing to work as hard as I can.
There is no past, there's no future, there's just this moment right here.
If I did that, if I can get through that, like, come at me.
Changing how I saw myself, like as a man, not just as an athlete.
It's okay that I struggle. It's okay. That's part of the deal. That's how I respond to it.
2,500 years ago, Socrates brought the Greek aphorism, know thyself, into the forefront of philosophy. His point was that before you can claim to know anything, you must know yourself. Human wisdom, he said, begins with the recognition of one's own ignorance. You and I, as athletes and as humans, are ignorant. We see the world through our narrow perceptual bubble. Our beliefs filter out information which could help us in pursuit of our goals. Our confirmation bias dismisses anything that's too uncomfortable to digest. Our own personal experience fashions a lens which distorts the color of the world. What does this mean for us as athletes? We turn away from the information which is the exact data which would highlight a path of growth, the thing that we say we want. We hide from the uncomfortable truth of weaknesses. We avoid situations, conversations, and tests which may bring our limitations to light. All of this results in what Justin Cotler calls the worst thing an athlete can have. Doubt. Am I fast enough? Am I strong enough? Will I miss this rep? What if I get sick again? More to the point, am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? Will people still like me? Will I be happy? Doubt is the antithesis to what athletes truly require. Confidence. In this conversation, Justin Cotler and I discuss the path athletes, coaches, and humans alike can take to becoming more confident and ridding ourselves of doubt. We also discuss the role of ego in sports, the testing of your mindset, why not being talented may be your greatest advantage, generating self-knowledge and creating turning points in your life. So make sure you subscribe to the Limitless Athlete podcast and follow Mindset Rx on Instagram so you don't miss upcoming episodes, which will help you create the mindset to take you to your potential. Now, without further ado, here is head coach of Underdogs Athletics, Justin Cotler. Justin, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. It is a real pleasure to speak to you.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start with your background and a little bit about you so we can find out a bit more about like how you became the person you are today, the coach you are today, and the human you are today. It's been a while since I wrote these notes because of my tardiness last time. Shamefully admitting to the world that I was a no-show. So the notes I've got here talk me through your injury. You had a pretty significant injury when you were younger, right?
I did. Yeah. I was 15 years old. I was, it's crazy because those like those flashes in your brain, you know, that you still remember. Because I mean, 15 years old now is a long time ago. But I remember we were at basketball practice at high school, and you know how kids, when they're, you know, at that age, especially basketball players, they're just messing around and, you know, jumping, hanging on the rim, you know, jumping up, dunking, doing things like that. And my buddies and I was just kind of like warming up, and I remember I just went up to literally to jump to hang on the rim. And when I jumped off my left leg, my whole life changed, actually. So now I really think about it, like the progression of it. But yeah, I had a condition called Osgood-Schlatter, which is very common growth disease. I mean, it causes something called runner's knee, essentially, which is where you get kind of pain and tendonitis right where the patella tendon meets the tibial tuberosity, which is right there. Yeah. And in most cases, you know, it causes like a little bump and it causes discomfort. But in my case, it weakened that area so much that when I took off to jump, and my quad flexed and the kneecap comes up and the patella tendon stretches, and it just yanked the growth plate right off the tibia, and it goes in and essentially just cuts everything up in my knee. And, you know, so essentially the lower half of my leg was almost disconnected from the upper half of my leg. And so they had to go in and essentially reconstruct the knee. I still have hardware in there from that injury. I had to learn how to walk again, 6 months of rehab, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, at 15 years old, which was interesting. Yeah. You know, at the time I was a pretty heavily recruited basketball player. And I did go on to have a very successful high school career. And then I played a year in college. And then I eventually actually switched to my other sport that I was pretty good at, which was golf. So I played basketball and golf in college, but it was never quite the same. The knee was always, it was just always something I had to deal with, you know. I mean, even now, like I've been bone on bone in that knee now since I was 28 years old, which is almost for 20 years. You know, it has greatly affected my life and a lot of the things that I want to be able to do, you know, now at this point, because it's bone on bone, you know, a lot of the high impact stuff that I used to do, you know, now, essentially, it's still functional, but there are a lot of things I can't do anymore, which eventually, you know, as I get older, I'm okay with, like I've come to terms with it. But as someone who was, you know, and is incredibly competitive and who was an athlete their entire lives, it's hard to not be able to do something because of an injury or because you're in pain. Yeah. So that's been a challenge. Yeah, but you know, it's like anything. I mean, you learn how to live with it and, you know, you learn how to make the best of it. And, you know, I can still do a lot of things. I mean, I'm still pretty fit. I still train a lot. There's just, you know, the competing days are over. You know, running a marathon is over.
Yeah,
any of that stuff is over. Yeah,
thankfully,
exactly.
running a marathon is over.
Yeah, I can still row a marathon. So that's
yeah, great news. So 15 years old, that is a time. Well, I suppose it's there's a small blessing in the curse of doing that because you're more likely to heal a bit more quickly and all that kind of stuff. But the fact you're on one path to essentially looking towards professional sports, I'm guessing, or very high level sport, and then you have to shift your identity and like, this is who I am. What was that process like?
Honestly, it was pretty hard at the beginning. I can remember, I mean, now listen, this is, you know, we're talking 30 years ago. But I can remember, you know, many like crying nights, you know, and wondering why. And, you know, I missed that season, which was my 10th grade season here in the States, my sophomore year. And you know, again, it was hard, but I think at that point, after it was over, there was a realization that, you know, listen, I was on a track to probably play like major Division I college basketball, you know, and there was a shift, and then, you know, started looking at smaller schools, and smaller schools ended up being higher academic schools. So I ended up going to an Ivy League school and playing sports, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, but ultimately, I think it was a lesson in perseverance, and at a very young age, where I had to you know, persevere through this traumatic event. And it did make me a lot tougher, because I have not lived a day since I was 15 years old without pain. So every step that I take, you know, every time I do anything athletic, any time that I've done anything since I was 15, I've had pain in my knee. It's just the way it is. So at this point, like, I've just learned to live with it, and I don't know what it would be like without it, which is interesting to think about, because it's a bit of a mind fuck. But at the same time, I'm just used to it. So, you know, some days are better than others, and, you know, and I'm pretty smart now, where I used to be extremely stubborn, and I would just, you know, it was essentially like, I would just do something and be like, screw it. And then of course I'd be with ice on the knee for about 5 days, but it's much better. You know, I mean, it's okay now though.
How long did it take before we could look back and go, actually, you know, there were some positives in it?
I honestly, it took a long time for me to look back and say there were some positives in it, because I would think about the pain and the limitation, you know, and what it caused. But I think, honestly, like, when I look at where I'm at now, and I look at what I'm doing now, and I look at the experience that I've had dealing with that, I mean, it prepared me unbelievably for this role in my life, right? Like, after college, I don't know if you know, I mean, I was a full-time musician. I was a full-time recording artist for about 10 years. I was always heavily into sports and athletics, but, you know, fitness became my life right around 2009. So, you know, about 13 years ago, 2008, 2009, where I transitioned from music into fitness full-time. But, you know, there's been an incredible, I think it's been an amazing journey, in the sense that I've been able to impart a lot of knowledge about perseverance, about recovering from injuries, which most, you know, high-level athletes have to deal with it at some point. I'm kind of a knee guru because of it. You know, there's just a lot of things that I had to overcome. And I think it made me extremely mentally tough as well, which I think is a positive, obviously, in this, you know, in this field and in this sport, obviously. So I would say that probably not until I started my coaching career, you know, which is probably about 13 years ago or so, that it was one of those things where I was like, this is probably like a notch in my belt. Like, this is probably something that's beneficial. You know, but yeah, it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, I bet it takes, like, time is the greatest healer, right? So it gives us that time to look back. You obviously work with a ton of athletes, and have worked with a ton of athletes. One of those being Bethany Shadburn, who's like literally just had, I suppose it's an ongoing injury. We just interviewed her on the podcast, so we're able to kind of speak to her like about that as it was beginning to flare up. But that's such a tough call, especially after last year as well. And so what happened? So, like, how do you use that? How do you use that reference point in order to connect and help your athletes?
You know, I think that there is a level of understanding, like, you know, that I have from experiencing that, and a level of respect. Like, I've seen Bethany try to battle through, you know, what she's dealing with. And we were very successful last year in kind of creating a program and a plan for her. And this year, after she caught COVID, it's kind of just been one thing after another that kind of led up to the back, and we just haven't been able to get ahead of it. And, Bethany and I met the other day, and I know, this has really been tough for her mentally. It's just hard, especially 2 years in a row. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that last year she was in the best physical shape she's ever been in. She was scary good going into the games last year, and it was really a shame, for her and Carrie both, with COVID. But this year it's really been challenging, and so there's some things that we're doing, with her. Obviously we're going to get some imaging and make sure structurally that it hasn't changed over the last 2 years. But in general, I think, for her, the hardest thing is keeping that momentum or keeping that fire within her when you've got to deal with an injury for so long, and one of the great things about Bethany is I think, she's pretty amazing at just kind of accepting. Like she's just has this amazing job of accepting, like,
which is
okay,
not easy to do.
No, it's not. And it's kind of like she's just, she's like, this is my burden. Like, I feel like I'm not done yet. I'm going to do what I have to do now to get back. And she knows, like, I'll, that I'm here for her, and I'll do whatever she needs to be able to help her get there. If that means now giving her space to, I know she's doing a lot outside the gym. She's hiking. She's, doing a lot of, kind of being one with herself and things like that, which is what she needs right now. I know she's, coming to the gym and you see everybody training for semifinals. That's hard. You immediately like have FOMO and you just want to do things, and it puts you in a bad mood. So she's doing the best that she can do. And I think honestly, she's handling it very well. We had a very candid conversation the other day, and a lot of tears, but I was very impressed with where she's at. And I don't think it's the last you've heard from her, for sure.
No, something tells me that it's definitely not the last. Yeah. What are the important things to tell an athlete, or for an athlete to remember who's going through injury?
I mean, I don't think there's any, and this is the hardest thing, is patience. I mean, it's so hard for athletes to have patience. And it's so hard there's two things there, right? Patience and then listening to your body. A lot of times, like, I can remember, when I was going through physical rehab and, talk about working through an injury, right? And it's like the pain scale. So like if it's over a 3, you probably shouldn't be doing it, right? But if it's up to a 3, you're getting blood in the area, it's probably helping, etc. Well, that's hard to tell these athletes, man, because what might be somebody's pain scale at 6 is probably their pain scale at 2 or 3. So it's really hard to know whether or not they're setting themselves back. And we've seen people come back too fast, and we've seen them, I see it all the time where, you've got a minor injury that turns into a major injury because didn't give it the rest and the time that it needed. So, just trying to reinforce, like, hey, this happens. This happens to everybody, and ultimately it's a matter of doing all the right things inside and outside the gym. Listening to, your physio, listening to your body, making sure you're getting enough sleep and the right nutrition, et cetera, which is really hard, man. It's tough, especially when you have an injury, because you want to get back fast. And it's almost like, most people, especially athletes, just tend to overdo things. So really it's just try to be understanding, but also kind of, impart the knowledge that I've had, because I had a setback when I was a kid. I can remember it, like, I was doing stuff I shouldn't have done. And one day, I had a setback where I was way too fast back into playing basketball again. And I slipped, and, kind of the knee went the wrong way, and it set me back a couple of months. So, I think it's easy to do that if you're not patient and kind of give it the care and the time that it needs. And that's, we do the best we can as coaches to try to help, but it's hard. It's hard. It's definitely hard.
Yeah, I can remember a similar thing myself. When I was a kid, I was temporarily diagnosed with the least positive sounding diagnosis ever, which is sudden death syndrome, which is, yeah, I know, terrifying. Terrifying for your parents to be told that as well. But essentially, I was getting anxiety-induced palpitations, and they're like, you need to stop exercising because you may drop dead, which was probably a good thing to stop a child from dying, but quite an intense way to do it. So, but like, until then, I was like the active kid, and it was like, my whole personality was built around football, soccer, cricket, like very English sports, cricket, soccer, these kind of things. And I was not allowed to train for like 6 months. And then I was just like watching kids kick a ball around the park. And I was like, right, I've got to get involved. And I had palpitations again, but it's like that terrifying thing of like, this has happened again. But it's also like the ego's so wrapped up in like, this is who I am. And that's, as a child, like as 13, 14-year-old child I was then, but like when your income and your success in your career and therefore more of your identity is based around this is who I am as an athlete, and then it's like, actually you're not allowed to do semis or you're not allowed to compete this competition, that must be even harder.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And I mean, I've had conversations with athletes before where they've been injured or weren't able to do something, and the first things out of their mouth were, am I going to lose my sponsors? You know, am I going to lose my financial support? Am I going to lose this? It's just, but you can see why people come back too soon. And you can see why, you know what I mean? Because there's that financial pressure, you know, and it's tough, man, because CrossFit's one of those sports where, you know, we're still, I mean, honestly, if we're talking about it, we're still in the incipient stages. We're still the beginning stages, you know, and the money's not where it will be, hopefully, eventually. And, you know, it's not, a lot of these athletes, they miss a season or two and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to pick up another job and I have to start coaching and I have to do this. And you know, and I hope we get to the point where, you know, obviously there are more financial opportunities and there's a union with healthcare and all these different things, but that's a whole nother conversation. But, you know, that creates so much external and internal pressure, you know, that I think is, it's really hard for that not to be an extremely negative component. And it's, you know, but again, you know, you try, right? You try as a coach to explain like, hey, like I understand how you feel, but if you rush it, it's gonna end up taking that much longer because you're gonna have a setback. So, you know, it's just trying to keep, you know, stay the course and make sure that they're doing all the right things inside and outside the gym, you know, to be able to heal.
Yeah. And think about that from like a mindset coach perspective as well. Like you're thrown into complete turmoil and complete uncertainty. It's like, when we have an identity, when we have a like fixed or like stable-ish identity of like, this is who I am, it dictates what you do. It dictates how you react to things. It takes like, it eliminates so many choices from you and gives you simple options. And then all of a sudden you're thrown into the unknown, and then your identity and your beliefs begin to become a little bit unraveled and not quite so tight. And you'd like try and get some of that certainty and stability back by like, okay, if I can train, then I've got like understand myself a bit more. And then dealing with that is like, you're dealing with the fear of losing sponsorship, and you're dealing with the fear of like losing your income and whatever that means for the future, and where you previously had this stability. And you're also dealing with the instability of who am I at the end of the day?
Right.
Like, who am I? And that's a big question to be confronted with unintentionally.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because ultimately it's like, if you lose your identity, then what do you have? Right. And that's, I mean, that's brutal. And I honestly, like it's funny is like, I feel like I've kind of come to two of those crossroads in my life with sports and then with music. Like there were those points where you were like, you know, with the injury. And then as I got a little bit older and realizing, hey, like I'm really good at this, but I'm not good enough to make a living from it. And that was kind of the deal with sports. You know, and then with music, it was, you know, just 10 years, 12 years in the music industry, and the roller coaster ride of having a record deal and not having one, and having a management company and having them go bankrupt, and being up here and then the next minute being down here, and then seeing some of your contemporaries get to where you expected to be and then you not being there. And I mean, talk about a loss of identity, and talk about just a and a completely like unstable existence. And that was definitely, I remember that as being an incredibly challenging part of my life. But again, another one that got me on the road to where I am, and helped me to be able to shape and inform others who I see who have a lot of those same tendencies. So having the experience to be able to kind of survive, has definitely helped me be able to give advice and help out in that aspect.
Yeah, tenacity, right? It keeps you going, and it's like being able to demonstrate that to your athletes must be such a gift to have. It's like, okay, this is what it's like, and not displaying it through words but through actions. It's like they know that's what you've been through. They know what change you've been through. Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, chances are you'll enjoy our free ebook, How to Stop Substandard Self-Critical Plateaus and Unleash Your Potential. It's a step-by-step guide to finding your mojo again and getting back to the athlete you know you can be. It's free. You just have to stick your email address in and download it. To find it, head to mindsetrxd.com/ebook. That's mindsetrxd.com/ebook. Now, let's get on with the show. Why fitness after singing and music?
Well, I mean, so when I was a kid, it was always music and sports. Like that's, I can remember, as far back as I can remember, having a ball in one hand and then getting up on the counter and singing at all family functions. Like it was just, they always went hand in hand to me. I'm a rabid sports fan. And as a kid, I essentially, went from one practice to the next practice to the next practice. Like it was just constant sport in my life and really in my family's life. We're an incredibly like athletic family, but also a family that just loves sports. But what's interesting though, and so throughout my entire music career, I was always training. But I think at that point it was a lot more for aesthetics, right, than it was for functionality. And that's just entertainment in general, right? The entertainment industry, especially like being an R&B singer, you want to look good when you take your shirt off. So that was the main thing then. But when as I got older and when I got towards the end of my music career, and I kind of dove into fitness. And I have a very what's the word I'm looking for? I'm I can't think of it. No, obsessive. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. An incredibly obsessive personality. So when I get into these, like I have a story, like when I was a kid and I saw people juggling, I had to learn how to juggle at 7 years old. Like I picked up a couple balls. I learned how to juggle in about an hour and then I never juggled again. It was just like one of those things where I had to do things like I had to, right? So eventually, like, especially coming out of fitness or coming out of music, there was a period of my life that I had gotten very sick. I have ulcerative colitis, which if you know anything about ulcerative colitis, it's an irritable bowel disease, similar to Crohn's disease. And when it flares up, you can lose massive amounts of weight in a very short period of time. So I lost 50 pounds in 3 weeks when I was in 2007. I was in the hospital for a little while. When I came out of it, and my buddy who was an actor in New York, because this was all back in New York, and he was in the entertainment industry, and he was like, listen, let's train, let's get your body back, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of dove into functional fitness. We dove into, there was a website at the time, Jim Jones, which is what like all the guys from 300 did, and it was for like Mark Twight was an early CrossFit guy with Glassman before he got excommunicated, and then started Jim Jones. So we were doing Jim Jones, we were doing .com, back in 2008, and it was kind of like the stuff that was being whispered in the gyms, like because the Globo gyms were still kind of taken over, and you were still dealing with people who thought the world was flat when they saw you doing CrossFit. They didn't know what the hell you were doing. And he and I started training together, and we just got kind of obsessive, and we became addicted to functional fitness, and it became like my new stage. It became, where I went from music to being able to where, in music, you can help people and you can take people away and you can change people's lives with the stuff that you're writing. But in fitness, you could do the same thing. And we started coaching a class, and then I started coaching athletes, and I was able to see that, where I was able to help people and where I was able to affect people with my music, I can now affect people through fitness. And I was able to help them and change their lives. And that, when I opened up my gym, that was our motto: change your fitness, change your life. And so this became like I said, it kind of became my new stage. It became my new opportunity to be able to help people, and my new opportunity to be able to change people's lives. And that kind of stemmed all the way from, like your everyday soccer mom that would walk in and take class to, eventually Carrie Pierce, right? Like it's just, so that's kind of how it happened. It's just, it became like my new obsession, but this was a much more healthy one for sure.
Yeah. When thinking about this, I was thinking about what's the commonality? What's the driver, the psychological driver that's the overlap between singing and music and fitness, and that ability to affect people emotionally and to affect their sense of who they are. Probably that's what it is. It's that human connection, right?
Yeah, without question. And it's cool because I felt it very early with fitness, seeing like the joy and seeing the effect that you could have, on people being able to reach their potential or reach a goal, right? Like there is just something that's inherently beautiful about that. And when I went out on my own and opened up my own gym in 2010, it was, my wife was part of that. And well, at the time we weren't married, but we were dating. So, but there was a few of us that just kind of took a chance, and we started in this really small space. And, a lot of it was just small group training and personal training at the time. And we started to develop this reputation, and it really blew up very quickly in our town and in Astoria, New York. And, before too long, we were in a much bigger space and, affiliated with CrossFit, et cetera. But there was, and at the time it was one of those things where we were coaching all the classes. We were coaching, all the foundations classes, and, you were running yourself ragged. But it was worth every second of it because you saw what it was doing. You saw the effect you were having on people, and it was this high. And it felt very similar to music in a lot of ways, honestly. And I think my performance background and my wife's performance background too. She was she has a degree in musical theater, and she toured New York and various other places. Phenomenal singer, and I think both of our performance background helped a lot with being able to reach people and being able to read a crowd and being able to know what people want. And I think it's helped me a lot in coaching because I feel very comfortable in that setting, in front of people. And so, it's crazy because I always said I was put on earth to sing. Like that was, I always felt that in my bones. But I think that as much as I was put on earth to sing, I was put on earth to do what I'm doing now, and I feel like, I've been able to affect a lot of people in a very positive way. And I'm very proud of that. It's pretty cool. It's a cool life, it's a labor of love. That's for sure.
So before we were meant to interview last time or podcast together last time, I put out a little Instagram kind of question, what should I ask you? And a little rumor came up. And before we leave the music side of things, I just want to double check whether this is true and see whether there's any truth in it. Did you perform for Aretha Franklin at some point?
Okay. So no, here's what happened. I opened for Diana Ross. I opened for Joe Cocker. So the Aretha Franklin thing might have been, we did a show down in Palm Beach. It was actually for Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, and it was like on their big. But it was an Aretha Franklin like tribute thing, but it was Jennifer Hudson who actually performed with us and did all the Aretha Franklin songs. So it wasn't with Aretha, but it was, she just did a whole set of Aretha songs. It was kind of like, Jennifer Hudson does Aretha. And this was just after Dreamgirls when she like blew up and won an Oscar, et cetera. But Aretha wasn't there, but Donald Trump was there. So, yeah.
Not quite the same vibe.
Not quite the same vibe. But yeah, it's interesting. There was a lot of really cool events. Like, so after my kind of like original, music career was over, essentially it's crazy. I kind of did music and fitness they overlapped for a little while. So from like 2009 to 2014, I was like a hired gun. I was essentially singing in these unbelievable event bands that you go to a big event and you see a 12-piece band with a full horn section and 4 singers, and you're like, holy shit, this band's unbelievable. Those were the type of bands. So we did the Red Cross Gala Ball for the Prince of Monaco. David Beckham was at that one. That's where we opened for Joe Cocker. We did the CEO of Reebok's 50th anniversary party on his estate in Cape Cod, and that was we opened for Diana Ross. We did that stuff at Mar-a-Lago down in Palm Beach, for Kraft and Trump, and we did all these incredible parties. And I got to work with some unbelievable singers and amazing musicians, and it was extremely fulfilling. But then eventually, I just started coaching so much, and then eventually when I started coaching in the Grid League, the National Pro Grid League here in the States, I just got too busy and something had to give. So, but it was cool. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. So you've spent so much time in such I'd say diverse, but with commonalities, 2 different areas. What you must have learned a lot about mindset in that, and the mental approaches we take when we're trying to be our best. What does mindset excellence not look like?
What does it not look like?
Yeah.
Well, I think I have a lot of experience in this because, I played competitive golf, which is one of those sports that, and I actually, for a period of time, when I was a kid, I did see a sports psychologist for a while to try to help me with my routine and negative thoughts and all those things. I think that the way that we talk to our athletes, and one of the most important things is ultimately like the worst thing you can have is doubt, right? Like going into a competition, going into a workout is essentially questioning yourself, whether it's a movement, whether it's your strategy, whether it's your preparation, whether it's your warm up, whatever it is, right? And it's a big problem, and you see it all the time, right? Like, and the athletes that are the best are I think the athletes. Listen, I think it's very natural. I think it's an extremely common human emotion, right? To essentially have doubt and fear, and how do you overcome that? And a lot of that is practice, right? Is essentially like, we get into our daily training day, and we talk a lot about intention, and we talk a lot about practicing and really knowing yourself as an athlete, so that you kind of take a lot of the question marks out of the workout, out of your movements, out of your pacing, out of your rep schemes, etc. And that's the thing I think we try to fight the most is doubt and fear. Because if you have an athlete that can go into a competition, the workouts come out, and there's no doubt there. There's no fear. There's just essentially like, okay, this is the workout. This is how I'm going to attack it. And, I'm in my zone. I'm in my bubble. I'm not worrying about what anyone else is doing. And I'm maximizing my potential and point value on every single workout. That's a big thing. And that's really what we preach. But I think trying to get that voice out of your head, that's saying, man, I don't know if I can do 30 strict handstand push-ups, or it's going to take me longer than this person, or I don't know if I can do this, blah, blah, blah. So, having that doubt creep in, the negative voices, I think obviously is a killer for mindset excellence.
Yeah, 100%. It's that uncertainty piece again from the what is my identity? Who am I? That made into a kind of small version is like, can I do this? Is it possible for me? Am I good enough at the end of the day to do this? What techniques do you have to overcome doubt and fear?
So a couple of things that we work on hard, like I said, is essentially like every single piece we do in the gym. We talk to the athletes about creating an intention and creating a goal. So even if it's a quote unquote, weakness movement, I don't like to even use that word, but if it's a movement that ultimately they know, listen, like if this comes up, this is something I have to manage. It's not, say, a strength, right? But it's knowing yourself as an athlete the best that you can possibly know yourself. So essentially getting as much data and information from each piece that we can, so that then we can talk about how to attack things so that you take all the doubt out of it, right? So that essentially it almost comes down to a science where it's like, okay, you've got this many seconds doing this, you're resting this many seconds, you've got this many seconds doing this. And no matter what anybody else is doing, this is how we're attacking it. This is how we're doing it. And when you practice like that, you get to know yourself so well as an athlete that nothing anymore is a question. Like it now just is, right? So that's one of the biggest ways that we kind of fight doubt and uncertainty, as you said. And if you do it in practice and you become good at doing it in practice, then doing it in a competition becomes routine. And I think you've seen that with some of the best athletes in CrossFit. He's not one of my athletes, but I look at someone like Brent Fikowski, who's had to overcome a lot of, there's a lot of difficulties and movement difficulties simply because of his size and his lever length. And he essentially has kind of broken down the sport almost to a science. I guess why they call him a professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it looks so methodical, everything that he does, and you're like, oh, he's not moving very fast. But then at the end of a workout, right, he's top 3 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And it's because he knows himself so well and he understands where he excels and he understands his limitations, and he's able to construct a plan to be able to then have success. And I think as a coach, right, like there are very few athletes that you can just say go, right? And there are a couple, right? I mean, probably the number one athlete in the sport right now, Tia Claire Toomey, is just one of those athletes that doesn't have a weakness. And, you could give her a workout and tell her to go and she could probably win it even without devising a plan. But there are very few people like that. Mm-hmm. So ultimately it's understanding yourself as an athlete as well as you can, practicing that every day in the gym, and then ultimately being able to replicate that on the competition floor.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Brent then, because we coached him with mindset for, 18 months, 2 years or so. And the one thing that I definitely didn't have to teach him was, okay, let's step back, be objective about this and like take the emotions out. He was phenomenal and still is phenomenal. Like, okay, This is the situation. Even when shit happens, it's like, this is the situation, I'm going to go with it. And it's definitely something to work on for all athletes. I suppose the reason that we don't look squarely in the face of things is often because it's scary. It's like, what could this be? What I could actually be even less good at this than I think I am right now, or this doubt is telling me. So if I don't look at it, then I don't have anything to work with. And it's interesting that you brought up like the kind of, okay, we're going to go out there and collect data. We're going to test yourself. We're going to know yourself. And when we're doing mindset as well, that's where we start. It's like, okay, what are the thoughts, the emotions, physical sensations, behaviors? Like, we're coming at it from a kind of a less a tactical point of view, but it's the psychological, and it's the same place. It's like, first you have to test, then you figure out where you want to go, and then you figure out the path to get there. It's the same process of growth there.
Test and assess, and that's a huge part of what we do. And there, and I've, I would say kind of, our Brent, right? Like in our camp, or someone that I've coached who's been the best at that has been Carrie. Carrie is one of those athletes that, she was able to overcome her physical shortcomings by understanding herself as an athlete better than 99.9% of athletes out there. She wasn't the most talented. Now, obviously, she had some special gifts from her gymnastics days, but there were a lot of things that you would, if you looked at that specific movement, you'd say, "Oh, that's not a strength of Carrie's. Oh, that's not very good for her. Oh, that's not great. She's not super strong. She's not a great runner. She's not good at rowing. She's not good. She's not a great swimmer. She's not good at that. But she just finished, third in the world. So it's one of those things that." She was able to maximize her potential every single workout, every single competition. And, and that had a lot to do with not just her physical output, but her mental fortitude. Right. And Carrie was one of those athletes I always said she never got too high and she never got too low. It was just a situation where the workout came, she just won the workout. Great. On to the next workout. Oh, she just came in 19th on the workout. Fine. Next workout. And that was just the way that she was. And it was amazing. I would say it's as a coach, she was a coach's dream, right? You don't know if you'll ever get another Carrie. And she was, and she is, she's obviously like part of our family now. It's beyond just a friendship, but, that was her superpower, was being able to maximize her potential on every single workout. And understand herself as an athlete and really know down to the second, how long she needed to rest, how long it was going to take to do this, et cetera. It was just, it was amazing. And it made it, it was amazing as a coach to watch, she made me look good a lot of times.
Yeah. There's a couple of things about Carrie. We spoke to Carrie actually on the podcast last Friday, and she was talking about in the grand scheme of things, this is nothing. And that was really cool to hear her talk about competing in that way and bad breaks and the way that will happen. And just okay, in the grand scheme of things this way. But she also said, it must have been a recurring theme in conversations or something that is particularly evident, because she was talking about something you said to her, which was, look, you're not the most talented, but you'll outwork everyone. And for people who believe in that kind of the talent myth or innate talent, and they have that fixed mindset of oh, you're either talented or you're not, that could be the most insulting thing ever. But what it actually says is, hey, you can grow. You can become anyone you want to be. You can become a better version of yourself if you continue to work hard enough.
And I think eventually Carrie kind of wore that as a badge, which was essentially hey,
that's what she was like.
I know I'm not the most talented, right? I there are limitations, one, because of my stature, two, because of my background, I have to work my ass off at certain things. I don't have, I wasn't necessarily, she wasn't necessarily, gifted at certain elements, and certain movements, but first of all, no one outworked her. And I would always tell her, and it wasn't just me saying it to say it, it was saying it because it was the truth. We would go into a workout and I would look at Carrie and I would just say to her, just be tougher than everyone else. And it wasn't like, oh, you say that to someone. No, it was, I know she can be. and I know she will be. It was just a reminder that all you have to do if you go out there is be tougher than everybody else. And if you're tougher than everybody else, you're going to have a great result. It doesn't matter what the workout is, right? And so you look at something like an Atalanta, or you look at a Murph, or you look at, those type of workouts where you would see some people who just, they just give up. They don't want to go to that place, and that was where Carrie would thrive. She would thrive in that place. Like, it was like, the more pain, the better. Just give it to me. Like, I would rather it be harder. I would rather it be worse. I would rather it be brutal, because I know I'm going to be able to withstand that physically and mentally. And I know other people are going to break down, and I can, and I want it. Like, I crave that. And that was, that's a gift. There's not a lot of people who have that, and they may be the most talented in the world, but if they don't have that, they're not going to be super successful in the sport.
What I love about that is that the data points are exactly the same. Carrie's stature doesn't change. Carrie's natural, her genome and the way that expresses itself does not change. Like, who she is does not change. It's exactly the same data points, but the lens on it is different. And that lens turns her weakness into a strength. And that's the ability of the grit it out mindset. That's the ability of the mentally tough, resilient, strong mindset. It's like, okay, for me, for everyone else, this is getting impossibly difficult. And this is where I come into my own. This is where my superpower kicks in as it gets harder, not as it becomes easier, as it gets harder.
Right. And that's, and you just can't help but love somebody who can do that. And aside from the fact she's just like this amazing person, but, when we first started working together and I would see her do things and I would give her where I specifically remember a workout that I gave her that essentially was, and it's, I almost feel bad saying this as a coach, but I gave her a workout that I expected to physically break her, like physically and mentally break her. It was all of her weakness movements in one, essentially.
Was it sled push, dumbbell step overs?
She told you about that workout?
She told me about it, yeah. And she told me about the mid-workout tears as well.
Yeah, she cried in the middle of the workout. But she finished it because she always does. And, she never tapped out of a workout. But she finished it. And when it was over, I can specifically remember saying to her, you will never do anything ever again in the sport that's as hard as what you just did. Mm-hmm. And you were able to persevere and you were able to finish it. And it didn't last forever. Mm-hmm. And now look, you're able to recover and you're going to be fine. And we have another training day tomorrow and there's no issue. And I think that, I hope to think that kind of stuck in her head as like, this was as hard a workout as I could possibly do. It was every movement that I despise. And I was able to get through it. And that, yes, I had my moment, but I was able to persevere and get through it. And honestly, I never saw that from her ever again. Like, it was just, no matter what the workout was, there was never like, oh my God, that's going to suck. Like, oh geez, no, it was just like workout strategy, go. And, so it worked, but I'll tell you what, I can't do that with everybody. You have to know, you can't treat everybody the same, and you have to understand your athletes. And like, there are some athletes that if I tried to do that with, they're just not quite there. Like, it might be a little mentally fragile and it would go the other way. And it would be like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I suck, blah, blah, blah. So you've got to really understand your athlete. Like, you can't treat everybody the same. And I think as a coach, you have to understand that you're going to come across, very different athletes, some with, very different physical gifts, but also very different mental gifts. And if you're not able to read that situation, then you're setting people up for failure.
It's like, it's really important to focus on this on the one size fits one scenario, like mindset, training, everything is a one size fits one. Like, there's principles we follow, but it's always like, can you adapt it or adapt the nuance to the individual. And like whether, like from back when I was prescribing weightlifting percentages, like there's people respond differently to that. And now looking at people's journaling entries and talking through visualization and everything that we do now, like it's the same thing. Like the principles are the same, but can we create some nuance there? Can we fine tune this for you as an individual? And also then the athlete feels, hey, this is for me. This is special for me. It's not some cookie cutter template, and usually get better adherence to that too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah. There's, you're talking about that grit and that tough and doing that hard workouts purely to give yourself a reference point of like, this is how hard I can push. There's something I've been playing around with in the back of my mind for years now. And it comes from, again, military times where I just like, you're given that, 5 days, sleep deprivation, crawling through crap, carrying heavy loads. And like, I'd love to do, if we'd have to take some of the weight out of it, some of the danger out of it, but a reference point for elite athletes is like, hey, this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, but the games is never going to touch this, or a single workout is never going to touch this. And I think that's got utility and legs within the CrossFit world.
I think it does, and obviously, yeah, like you said, I mean, there's a fine line between like responsible and irresponsible, like making sure that it's not, Now I look back at that workout and listen, it wasn't that the thing about that workout is that it wasn't unfair in the sense that like all the movements were movements that we could possibly see. It was just all the movements that Carrie didn't like or wasn't good at. But you take a different athlete and they would love that, right? Because it was essentially like all strongman stuff or people that mostly tall athletes are good at. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's value in that, and but there's also you have to understand, you have to understand the athlete, and you have to understand like where the limitations are, and make sure that whatever you're devising, it works in a positive manner and not in a negative one. Because I think depending on where an athlete is in their career and depending on who they are, right? Like, you don't want to set them up for failure. And I think if there are some times where, you can give somebody a workout and it goes the other way, right? And it takes them a long time to be able to get over that mentally. Because I've seen that happen before as well, where like there's a workout or weakness workout or a workout where, they're doing it with a group and they have a really negative experience. And it's one of those things that then you have to, work through.
Yeah. It's usually when their estimate of their own ability is dramatically decreased, right? And it's where I thought I was here, but actually I'm here. And the abrupt nature of being shown that is almost like too much to bear.
And I think that that's really like a harsh reality of our sport too, because I think, you can, it's changed a little bit, I think, now with the training camps, in the sense that, a lot of these athletes are getting to train together and you get to see what the best can do on a daily basis. So it creates more reality for you. But, especially back in the day when there weren't a lot of training camps and people were training by themselves, and then all of a sudden they would go to a regional setting or a game setting. And it was like, holy shit. Like I thought I was here. And now like my whole world has been rocked because like, I'm not, I'm not where I thought I was. And
you
that's
also
that's a harsh reality.
Yeah. You also used to get the opposite though. Again, using Carrie's example, it's like, I've never done CrossFit before, to 9 months later being at the games. It's like ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, I remember, so she first walked into our gym and I started working with her, at the beginning of her career, but just being able to see her in that first year and walk in, and then a couple months later, it was just like, oh my gosh. And then, training for regionals, you saw she would come in and do a couple of workouts with some of the other girls that I was coaching, and she was just smoking them. And I was like, this is wild. Like this, it's crazy. And that's awesome. That's amazing to see. But that's a rarity. We don't see that a ton. Yeah.
So I asked you what a great mindset doesn't look like? What does it look like? If you had to like build the ultimate mindset, what components would it have?
I think that there's what we talked about, uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, when I talk to my athletes and we talk about, our plan on a daily basis, and we talk about a couple of things, and one of them is knowledge, like understanding yourself as an athlete. Because I don't care where you are as far as like on the totem pole, right? Like, but do you understand your athlete? Do you have a realistic understanding so that we can then put a successful plan in place? So I think, having the knowledge and the understanding of yourself as an athlete. Because knowledge is power. Right. And I think really having that understanding is huge as an athlete. I know that it's cliche, but there really is there's something that can be said about finding positivity even in an outcome that may not be, a desired outcome. And what I mean by that is like the positivity of looking at something and then learning from it, and then becoming better from it.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about assessment, but I think it's looking at something, if I do a workout, it doesn't go as planned. I can go one of two ways. I can immediately go the negative route where I'm like, fuck, I suck. This is terrible. And that's, you know what I mean? It starts to weigh on me and now I'm beating myself up. Or I can say, hey, this didn't go as I planned, but you know what? Like now I know I've got to do X, Y, and Z. And if I do that, I'm going to be able to be successful. So it's being able to take a positive out of something where it could be a negative situation. And that's hard. That's really hard to do. And somebody who actually, who's doing an unbelievable job and a much better job of doing that this season is Danielle. Danielle is an athlete who, when she first came to me, you want to talk about volatile and emotional and constant negative self-talk, like constant comparison, which is the thief of joy, right? Like all these things that she's now getting to. Now, listen, she's always going to be volatile and emotional, and that's part of what makes her great.
Self-knowledge, right?
Yeah. But we're getting to that point now where we can do a workout, and if it doesn't go well, she's now able to learn. And she's now able to take something positive out of it to make herself a better athlete. And it's part of the maturity process. And, it's part of why I think she's going to be one of the best in the world very soon. Not that she wasn't. I mean, 11th at the games is nothing to sneeze at. But when I say one of the best in the world, I'm talking about, top 5. And she's got that type of talent. And now she's starting to get there, I think, mentally and emotionally. And a lot of that just comes from, kind of flushing out the negative emotions, and the negative headspace when it's very easy to be negative after something that doesn't go well, and creating something positive from that experience. So those are the big things that we, talk about, and that's something that you can do really daily, from most of your training sessions. Even on a training day where, you say, you know what, today I just don't have it, in the sense of like, I don't feel great. The weights don't feel great, this or that. But there are still a ton of things you can learn, especially at this level, from most of the training sessions that we do. And it's being able to, it's really being able to piece those out and understand it and flush them out. And I think as a coach, you're constantly learning too. You're constantly seeing what works and, what cues work and, verbal cues and what you can say to one person, like I said, is not what you can say to another. And, it's trial and error. But again, there's no substitute for experience. This is my 13 years since my first games athlete. And there's been a lot of wrong there.
Yeah, of course.
And,
to err is to be human. Yeah, exactly. Was there a turning point with Danielle? Can you pinpoint that moment?
I honestly think that the games this past year, Danielle was thrown into a very difficult situation with Carrie and Bethany, testing positive for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then Danielle having to be essentially separated from, isolated from the entire group and the community. We were on our own in the barn. The two of us were like a pariah, right? Like she was tested 2 to 3 times a day. There were things that were just constantly fucking with her mentally. And you're not talking about someone who had the greatest mental fortitude, right? And there were moments at the games where there would be a workout and I would try to talk to her and she would just be like, I don't want to hear it. I'm going out there. I'm doing my thing. And that's it. I'm not in the headspace to talk about strategy or this and that. But her being able to get through that week and still be able to perform at a really high level, the relationship that she and I were able to forge through all of that adversity, I think it was a pivotal and seminal moment in her career because she was able to kind of see there will be no more stressful moment in hopefully, but no other CrossFit athlete has ever had to deal with what I've had to deal with this week of being isolated, of being tested 2 to 3 times a day where my games could be over at any moment, right? Having to wear a mask and being separated on the competition floor from everywhere else, right? They're separating her 3 to 4 lanes from everybody else, not being able to talk to people, not being able to it was one of those things that it was this unbelievable test and she passed it. And I think after she did that, she was like, I've got to give myself a little bit of a break here. What I did was pretty special. And I know that if I'm able to kind of level myself out mentally, I can be even better than that. And we talked a lot about it. And since then, I think, now listen, she still has her moments. But her moments where she would have a meltdown and they would last 2 or 3 days, where I would have to talk her off the ledge, they now last 10 minutes. And she's able to bounce back and she's able to learn from it. And I'm incredibly proud of her because, I can see, the difference. Now physically, she's as talented as an athlete as I've ever seen. But again, we've talked about that. You can be incredibly talented and still not be incredibly successful. There's several athletes that we see in other sports that have been unbelievably talented and not successful. She's starting to put it together though in all aspects. And it's really, it's really impressive. And it's also one of those things that I feel really good about as a coach, being able to see her do that and kind of help her and assist her in her journey. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I bet and I'm not saying this is the case, Danielle, because I don't know her as an individual, but what we quite often see is when people are volatile, it's often this fear of something driving it. It's fear of, for some people, being hurt, fear of not being good enough, fear of all these kind of things that could possibly come up. And it's that fear driven volatility is often quelled when we pass a severe test, when something is okay, I passed this test with flying colors. And it's a useful thing to remember. It's okay, we've got to, like you said, see this obstacle as an opportunity. This is the test, the gauntlet that is being thrown down right now is for me. This is the opportunity for me. And hopefully we can replace some of that fear with competence, because competence breeds confidence. That's what we want at the end of the day. And then we don't have that volatile reaction. Maybe we can see with a tiny bit more of an analytical viewpoint on that.
Yeah. and I think that was her moment,
Yeah.
And I even think she would, she was kind of talking about it afterwards, but she was like, not necessarily divine intervention, right? But just like this was thrust on me. And I feel like it was thrust on me for a reason. And essentially it was one of those things where like, if I don't learn from it, then, all of this has essentially been a waste. Like this was a really incredible moment for me to be able to persevere and show my resiliency. And the fact that I was able to do it, come out the other side, and I can grow and learn from this and be such a better athlete. And I think it's done just that,
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see.
Yeah. After this is up, I'm going to send you a podcast link that we recorded with an author called William B. Irvin. He wrote a book called The Stoic Challenge, and it's all about seeing everything through that lens. It's like this has been thrown down by the Stoic gods, and this is my gauntlet, and this is my challenge that I'm going to overcome. It's really cool episode, and this book is fantastic too. What have been your biggest tests as a coach in terms of mindset?
I honestly, I think that one of the toughest things, I think the pandemic, and more so because our business was shut down for 8 months. We picked up our family and moved from New York to Las Vegas in the middle of the pandemic. Because we didn't have a source of income. You start to question yourself. And it's crazy to think, but really, like, I had this unbelievably successful business that was essentially shut down overnight. And then now I've got a family, I've got 2 kids, and you start to question yourself as person, and essentially like, how did my life get to this point? Like now, we don't have an income source. We're going to burn through our savings. There's a lot of doubt as where I felt like I was a success. You start to question that and doubt that. And then I think that spills over into everything that you do. But then it was one of those moments where, like, my wife and I kind of had several sit downs, brainstorming sessions where we were just like bouncing things off the wall. What are we going to do next? Right. I mean, Carrie moved out here to Vegas with us. So it was awesome that I was still being able to coach her, but, I really didn't have a source of income. We lost our business, and it was a scenario where, I think for a lot of years, I had always thought of, well, should I create a program, an online program? There's all these, there's already all these online programs, you know what I mean? Like, that's another online program. But we took the chance, and we took a risk. And I always say, if you don't take a risk, you never get anywhere in life. And, we started Underdogs now about a year ago. And it's been unbelievably successful, and it's kind of taken off, and it's created this entire new world for us, and this new community, this new family, this new business, which has really enabled us to be able to thrive. And I think, it was kind of, at a time of like you just said, was at a time of extreme severe, we were able to, overcome this. And it was really cool for me, if I step back and look at it objectively, to kind of, again, see there was coming out of like a traumatic experience, and that we were able to devise a plan and be able to create something, for us to be able to strive and be successful. So I think as a coach, it was one of those moments where it was like, if you can kind of get through this, then you can pretty much get through anything, because honestly, we kind of hit rock bottom as far as, I would say everything except for health, right? Like, we were still healthy, which is huge, because if you don't have health, you don't have anything. But everything else, was rock bottom. Like, lose your business. You don't know where your next paycheck's coming from, all those different things. But at the end of the day, I think my wife and I have always kind of subscribed to the idea that, like, if you do something for the right reasons and you create something to help people, then ultimately the universe will provide. And I don't know if that's ridiculous, but that's kind of what we've done. And we created this thing. And again, I feel like we're helping people reach their maximum potential. And this time now it's kind of like on a global online program, and it's cool, man. That's so I think that that was kind of a big moment for us.
Yeah, I bet. Before I have to wrap up, there's a couple of questions about culture that I'd like to ask you. And the first one was actually from when we interviewed Bethany, and I can't remember the exact story, but it culminated in you coming over to her and saying something like, "Oh, we don't act like that here. That's not the way we do things here." Something like that. What are the rules of underdogs?
I think the biggest rule for us is like treat everybody the way you want to be treated. And I know that's an easy statement to say, but ultimately, like, this is a family. Like, there are a lot of coach athlete relationships that are business relationships. I don't know how to do that. I'm a very emotional person. And if somebody trusts me with their livelihood, like that's their career, they trust me, I can't help but create a bond. Like, there's a special bond that's created. And I look at these athletes, they're not just, it's not just coach athlete. It's not someone who I just make money off of. No, this is someone who ultimately has taken the leap of faith, to choose us, to guide them, to coach them, to mentor them. And for me, that's community, that's family, that's love. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that's the way we treat everybody. And from the top down, we expect that's the way that others should treat everybody else.
Beautiful. Let's wrap up with one question that I ask everyone. What habits do you perform for your own mental health and performance?
Man, oh man. It really is one of those things that can get lost as a father of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Busy.
I try to every single day just take a few minutes to slow down, to breathe and just, try to look at everything, like I said, from an extremely positive standpoint, and understand that, like, no matter how challenging things get, we are incredibly fortunate, and we've been given this platform to be able to help people. And I think it's easy to get caught up in your own bullshit and not really understand that. So every day for me, there's a moment where I just try to close my eyes, even if it's for 5 minutes, and reflect on that. And that tends to bring me a little bit of peace and helps me to be able to try to be a positive influence, no matter how stressful things get, and try to be a positive influence on those that are the closest to me, which is obviously my family and the Underdogs community.
Perfect. Where can people follow you, follow Underdogs? Find out more about how to work with you. Yeah.
So Instagram, Underdogs Athletics. You can go to the website, underdogsathletics.com, and they can, I'm at Justin Cotler on Instagram as well. So
perfect.
Those are the best places.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Limitless Athlete podcast. Head over to iTunes, head over to Spotify, head over to YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review if you'd be so kind. But make sure you subscribe. Subscribing is the only way that you can make sure that you don't miss out on any upcoming podcasts that we have. Whilst you're there, it may be useful to quickly head over to Instagram and follow Mindset Rx, so Mindset Rx'd, and you'll be doubly reminded of any upcoming podcasts. And also, we'll try and share some brain gains. Anyway, next week I'll be back with the wonderful Logan Gelbrick, and this is a real thinker of a podcast episode. So have a good week, enjoy your training, and embrace some hardship.